Hey, welcome back. I'm going to talk about how to print successfully with ASA filaments. In this case, I'm going to be using the Polymaker ASA, the orange color. I've got another ASA filaments, other 4 colors, but they are from another brand. And I'm going to be talking about the Polymaker ASA and all the settings I have personally, that I have configured, that I have set up in my printer. And my printer, the printer I'm using is the BambuLab P1S with the AMS2 Pro kit. So I'm going to talk about everything that allowed me to print this tool. So this tool is for carpenters to build decks. So this is just a spacer tool, and this was made with ASA, with that Polymaker ASA filament. It was printed in 3 parts, in 3 different pieces. And well, I was told that this was going to fail because the part is too big, because it's, that this was going to warp. Fortunately, this didn't, so I'm going to show you what I did so I was able to make this a success. So in first place, what I want to talk about is the quality of the filament. And honestly, you need to buy good filament. If you go for a $8, $10, $12 roll, and if it's ASA, honestly, you're set to fail, because this ASA filament is really tricky to print, and it has to be a good quality so that it doesn't warp, it doesn't break, or it holds its physical structure. So honestly, in my case, I'm in Australia, this roll of filament cost me $45. And it's Polymaker, so they are not outsourcing the filament from somewhere else. They have their own factory in China, but they have their own factory, so it's good that the filament comes from their fabric, from their factory. Second thing is dry your filament for some time, okay? Even if it's new, I tried drying my filament even coming out of the box. I took it out of the box, I took it out of the plastic bag, and I put it in about 45 minutes drying process in the BambuLab AMS2 Pro kit. So do that. This ASA filament, even though when it's printed is really tough, it's good to just try to dry it out, so that it helps with the quality of the finished product. Third thing will be clean the PEI sheet before you print. This filament, since it's so sensitive to everything like drafts, changing of temperature in the chamber, or probably if there is some specks of grease on the PEI sheet on the flexible bed, that's going to come off. So clean it up. I use isopropyl alcohol. Just use a towel, rub it in, let it dry for 1 minute, and you're good to go. On the slicer, now that you're set up, that you have your filament, dried, and that your PI sheet is clean, you jump onto the slicer. So these are the configurations I have for myself. And now I'm not going to tell you you have to use these or you must use these configurations, these settings. This works for me. You can try them and see if you can tweak them better so that it brings you a better result. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is elephant foot compensation. In this case, it has to be, for me, it was 0. So I've got my settings here as ABS, but doesn't matter. I printed with ASA. So if you check here on your slicer settings, elephant foot compensation 0, because that's going to cut just a touch of the filament of the final product, it's going to reduce the size of the first layer. And so to that, one of the recommendations that everyone gives out is that you have to use brim on every single printing you run with ASA or ABS. So that's the first thing. Elephant foot compensation, change it to 0. The second thing is increase wall loops to add strength to the part. That's good. So this is completely up to you. If you want to use, I don't know, 3 at least. 3 is the rule of thumb for PLA. But if you're printing a part that is going to be used like this tool, like this one, someone is going to use a hammer just to move things around, just give it a couple of volts more. So in this case, I changed my PLA settings to ASA from 3 to 5 volts. This is gonna give you better resistance on the whole model. Additionally, increase the top and bottom surfaces. Same thing. So since you increased the vertical walls or the walls, as well increase the horizontal walls. So I changed this only to 4. I had 3 in PLA. I changed this one to 4. Just make sure, I don't know, I've been playing around with this. You tell me if you have experience as well. But if you change this to 3 and leave this one 0.8, I think the lowest number is going to rule out the final printing. So just make sure if it's 4, just multiply 4 by 0.2. In my case, that's my height, my layer height. So 0.2 times 4, it's 0.8. Infill as well, I changed infill to 15%. That's good enough. If you want to go higher, perfect, that's gonna give you more strength. No harm in doing that. Now let's talk about speeds. So you can't print with these filaments too fast because you have to keep in mind the parts that you're going to print. If the part is big enough so that the filament dries out, a high speed is okay. In my case, I changed the initial layer from, just going to show you here, from 50 to 35. Okay, so I reduced 15 millimeters per second on speed on the first layer. That helps for the filament, the extruded filament, to dry it out properly and stick together really well to the plate. And initial layer infill, well, there was not much change, 105, but that's okay. It's just to ramp up the speed a little bit. Outer wall and inner wall. So on PLA, I have 200 millimeters per second for the outer wall, and inner wall is 300 millimeters. I just reduced 50 millimeters. To me, this worked perfectly. There were no more changes I did here. Everything is still the same, and probably just the bridge. I just reduced 10 millimeters per second, which is from 50 to 40. So that printed pretty well. Now I'm going to show you what I did for supports. In this case, I didn't use supports, so I'm going to show you the part that needed support. So here I had this part, this hole. So I had some supports supporting this part, okay, because it was a 360-degree circle, basically, okay. So what I did was I edited that hole to make this like that, okay, so with a triangle. That way you just don't need supports when printing the top area of the circle. Now this is going to be covered, which is this part. So the hole here is covered and this printed like this. So I didn't need supports, which is great. Bed adhesion in this case, as you can see, bed adhesion is 6 millimeters. Completely up to you. I think 2 millimeters is too low, and over 6 millimeters is just an overkill. You don't need that much of brim on the printing. I don't know from your experience if you have printed with ASA or ABS, but the brim basically is to keep the part stick to the bed so that if it starts to warp, it doesn't warp that bad. But if you can control the environment of the printer and you can control the temperature that is surrounding the printer, and you can control the temperature inside the chamber, honestly, you don't need that much of brim. So in my case, I only use 6 millimeters, that's it. And I'm going to show you here that is inside the others settings, and here brim type, outer brim only, and 6 millimeters width. For filament settings, let's talk about first the temperature that you have to play with on your PEI sheet. So in this case, I used 100 degrees for temperature on the bed. So here I set the texture PI plate layers, initial layer and other layers temperature to 100. It completely depends on the filament you have. Some of them may go down as low as probably 90, 95. Some others require higher temperatures. With this Polymaker ASA filament, 100 degrees were enough for me. For the nozzle temperature, I'm using 260 degrees. I was using 250, but I don't know. I think that if you ramp up a little bit the temperature, it's going to help the filament to extrude a little bit better, and it's going to create a better solid part. So yeah, I went from 250 to 260. It'll completely depend on your filament and the brand, depending on what are the tolerances of the print of the filament. Completely up to you to change it. Try to run some tower temps and probably the bridge temperature tests to see which one suits better the filament. Now, for cooling, this is a really interesting part. There was no cooling at all. So fans, the part fan, the chamber fan, everything was off. So it was only printing, only filament being extruded, no fan on, nothing cooling down the printing parts. Precisely because ASA or ABS, both filaments are really susceptible to temperature changes, and that will just cause the parts to warp and just come out of the bed. So fans were off. How did I shut them down? So on cooling for specific layers, well, fan speed 0%, minimum fan speed threshold 0%, max 0%, keep fan always on, I check this off. Slow printing down for better layer cooling, I check this off. If it's off, just leave it off. And this pre-start fan time 0%, so basically 0 seconds, sorry. So change everything to 0. That way, and auxiliary part cooling fan as well, 0%, so that the fans don't create any change on the temperature inside the chamber. Keep that in mind. Let's talk about the ventilation and temperature control in the room and the printer. So first, and this is really important, probably you have heard about this, is ASA, ABS, and probably every single filament produce volatile organic compounds. So which are basically fumes and then microparticles that are floating around when the filament gets extruded or when it gets heat up. You have to take care of that because that can cause serious health issues in the future. But try to keep one first is try to use, and this is what I use, I have a little fan that is in between the frame, the window frame and that sliding window. So I have that fan pushing out the air that is in the room, pushing out all that kind of nasty air that is inside my room where I print. So that way I reduce a bit those volatile organic compounds. Additionally, I have HEPA or HEPA filter sitting inside the printer on the lower end, so that it filters a lot more those VOCs, those volatile organic compounds that are expelled by the extruder or by the filament being heat up. And this is how I have the fan and the HEPA filter set up inside my printer. So the fan, what it's doing, it's sucking air through the filter and it's inside, and it doesn't change the temperature on the printer, which is good. Another tip that I would give you is try to cover the front of the printer and the top of the printer if you can with probably something that is not high risk for the printer to probably caught up in fire. So what I did was I put this foam in front of the printer, and of course I keep checking on the printer every single 10-15 minutes. So that foam in front of the printer helps two things. One, it keeps the temperature of the printer inside, so it keeps it controlled. And secondly, this foam is covering there is a little gap between the frame of the printer and the front door, where probably the air can sneak in and reduce the temperature of the printer. So with this I can keep control of the temperature inside the printer. I need to warn you, don't open the door of the printer when it starts to print. Never. If you do that, your printing is going to fail, because of course the chamber is going to take some time to heat up again to reach that internal temperature that is about 65-70 degrees, and that's going to push the temperature of the bed down and everything will come off the bed. So whenever you have everything ready, fan on the window pushing air out, the fan inside the printer with a HEPA filter, and you have the cover, those foams or whatever to cover the front door. Then before printing, this is a really good tip, just heat up your chamber for about 10 minutes before you print, okay? So you go to the printer, you set up the printer to heat up the bed for to 90 degrees or 100 degrees, whatever you want, at least 85. In my case, I always go to 90 degrees and I just let the printer to heat up for about 10 minutes and then I send to print. Of course, I don't open the door, I allow the room temperature to stay as stable as possible. If you want to run any calibrations for ironing of your, in this case it's not exactly for ABS, but this applies to every single filament. Every single filament behaves differently. So if you want to calibrate the ironing settings for your filament, you can visit this link. I'm going to leave the link inside in the comments, in the comment section, in the description of this video. And I did it. So this is the result of my test that I ran. So here it is. This is the test that it runs to make sure to find the best settings for your filament to run the ironing process. So basically what it changes is this. One, the ironing speed, it changes coin to coin, okay? So in this case it's 10, this one is 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 19, and 10, and 100. Now there is another change. This changes the ironing flow. So 10%, 20, up to 100. So of course, if you go this way, you go 10 by 10, 20, 20, 30, 30, up to 100, 200. So of course, since you're going to print these with ASA, you need to use your ASA settings. In my case, I'm just going to show you here. Well, it's there. So I'm using 6 millimeters of brim, and well, it's printed. Of course, this color, this, let's say, pink color, means that's ironing settings on. And so you send it to print, and these coins are printed, and every single coin on the top is going to be ironed. So the result of that is this. Now I'm going to show you a few differences that will tell you, oh, okay, so this speed and this flow are not correct or are not good for this filament. So this is at 10 millimeters per second and 30% in ironing flow. So as you can see, I marked with a cross every single coin that didn't work well for me, and that visually, that if I feel it, is not rough, okay? It's ironed. So all of these, everything, as you can see, it came like really bad. So of course, if I at the same speed I increase the ironing flow, it gets worse and worse and worse. And if I increase the speed, of course, it doesn't finish really well the test. So my good areas started to be here. So between, let's say, 30 millimeters and 60 millimeters, and between 10 and 30-40% ironing flow, so this area. And after I inspected every single coin really carefully, felt them, I can see that the best settings are between 30 millimeters per second on speed and 20% of ironing. So this changes a little bit from 30 to 40 millimeters per second, let's say 35, let's go with the middle, and with 20%. Now, if I go higher, it starts to show these little lines, these little specks around. And if I go lower, well, I have these as well. What you can do is just test it in a bigger piece, okay? So once you have these, go and change the ironing settings here. So you just change the ironing speed, ironing flow, and test it. Probably don't go too high, just 1 or 2 millimeters, and then activate the ironing option so that you can just have a really good finish on the top. So those are the settings that worked for me to be able to 3D print this. I hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments if I left something out of the video, probably that I forgot, but I made a really long list to be able to tackle every single bit that you need to know so that you can print successfully with ASA. Well, thank you so much for watching, and see you later.